and breathe. And what's that all about, Margaret?
So today we're going to talk
Oh,
about,
yeah. And also, you can tell them what we're going to talk about, but let them know who you are. If you never saw part one, please go check for part one, and that was suck, swallow, and breathe. And that's because we were talking about newborns and infants. Look at, go back and watch this information. It's mind blowing. And I want to just say this, everyone. Welcome to planet Earth, a life threatening, fun filled adventure. Because guess what? As soon as you get here, your parents and so called civilization and society are trying to kill you. You think I'm kidding? You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not. Why don't you take a look around? If you buy into the format that they're trying to deliver every day, and if you take a look at what they're trying to feed us, okay, I think you'll find out I'm right. And the reality is your so-called specialists, okay, that 99.9% of the population take their children to, know nothing about health, and this one does.
well, thank you, Dr. Wolf. So in part one, we talked about infants, and today we're going to talk about toddlers and school-age children. So in part one, we talked about how the baby's face develops in utero and why it's important to pay attention to how the structures of the face develop, and then how the baby, then once it's here, functions for the things that it has to do, meaning how it's breathing, sucking, and swallowing.
But none of this happens if what? None of it happens properly. Nothing gets developed. The face doesn't get developed properly. The whole structure doesn't get developed properly. And guess what? We can go and do a test with podiatrists and with these so-called specialists, and they don't know the information that Margaret knows.
Yep. So yeah, definitely, everything starts in utero, and so it starts with the mom. So if there's, any kind of chemical imbalances due to stress, diet, any medication that the mom might be on, that is going to have a direct impact on how the baby grows and develops in utero.
But there's something else here. And then guess what? It's even more important than the medication she's on. She's medicating herself. Either she's medicating herself with the dose or the hack. What's that? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, histamine, adrenaline, and cortisol. And the first one, the dose, is going to put her into a parasympathetic state, which means the baby's in a healing state. Are you getting this? Not in just a healing state, but the baby is in a creation state of everything beautiful and everything healthy. If the mother is in a fight, flight, fright, anxiety state, which she probably is, because usually the partner's talking about money and stress and everything else. And then when you go to a medical doctor, they don't know hardly anything about real health. And they're always talking about what could go wrong. Did you ever notice that? What could go wrong? What could go wrong? What could go wrong? Okay? Are you stressing out yet? And what happens is both partners get stressed out. And guess what? Every amount of stress that the mother has, every time she's stressed, she goes into fight, fright, or flight. That means all the blood goes to her arms and legs, which means it's not in her abdomen. Are you ready for that? Where's the baby? In the abdomen. So let's just take all the nutrition, all the oxygen, and all of the energy away and put it into her legs and arms, which she's not running because she should be running if she's scared, but she's not. She's sitting there freaking out, and that's freaking out the baby. And I believe that's how this all happened, this whole tongue tie thing. And everybody can say what they want, but I don't believe it. I believe that the psychological rules the biological, that the invisible creates the physical. And I don't really care. I'm not going to debate with anybody. They can even challenge me on it. But guess what? Most people and most specialists and most medical doctors are brainwashed. And I'm brainwashed too, but at least I'm brainwashed to empower my patients.
Yeah, and we gotta use logic at the end of the day. When you think about it, we know from literature that it's the process of apoptosis that gets disrupted.
What's that?
The process of cell elimination during the formation of the face.
Cell elimination and cellular creation, and that's what it's always about, whether you're talking about cells or bones.
Yep. And so, the literature says that, the tongue tie particularly is due to that process being disrupted, but why disrupted? And that's what the literature lacks to figure out, which what Dr. Wolf said.
Because all literature, my apologies, but all literature in North America is rewritten by Rockefeller Publishing, and all literature in Europe and throughout Asia is the Rothschilds. Now, why don't you do a check on them and see what they think about you? All right.
So anyway, so we talked about the face development. We talked about once the baby is here, why is it important to um, evaluate and assess the baby's ability to feed. You know, every baby has an innate ability to breastfeed. That's how we were made to be. We were supposed to be breastfed, not bottle fed, formula fed, you know, all that stuff. So if there's an issue, you know, the mom wants to breastfeed and there's an issue, that's a huge red flag that should not be ignored. And unfortunately, it is ignored many times. But go back and watch part one because I talked about all of that. And today is going into toddlers and older children. So what happens if, you know, the oral structure, tongue tie, any jaw deficiencies is not treated and it's not looked after since infancy, what happens to those kids later on? So what we know is how function dictates structure. So when the baby is born with a certain structure, then they have to figure out how to function with their muscles around them. But then that structure, that function, I'm sorry, that function then dictates how
What?
the baby continues to
One
grow
second,
and
one
develop.
second. Just say it. What? Louder? Okay, they can't hear you.
So
Okay.
come a little closer.
All right.
Okay, so structure dictates function, function dictates structure. So now we have a toddler.
Did you get that, everyone? That means that I'm right. The invisible creates the physical. That means that the emotional overrules everything, energy and motion. So if you don't get that, you're not going to get it. So you better learn how to calm down. And I was just talking to a really good friend about that this morning. And my friend is running two businesses, okay? And they have a beautiful big house. They have everything. But meanwhile, they don't have enough. And they don't have enough in here. It's not that they don't have enough out here. So we've all been taught to have anxiety and be anxious because guess what? When you have anxiety and anxious, you're never in the present moment. If you don't own the present moment, you don't own anything. Go ahead.
So we got that part about structure and function. So now when we look at a toddler and we notice that the teeth are coming in, the big red flag to look for is an upper gap in between the upper incisors. So if the child has a gap between the two teeth that are coming in, that means that child has an upper lip tie and it has to be
Okay, what do you
evaluated.
mean? Like, can you show me?
So in between your upper incisors, if there is a tissue that wraps around and then creates a gap in between the two teeth, so you have what we call diastema between the two teeth, that is an upper lip tie of class 4, and we have to evaluate it because now it's causing a structural restriction, and then most often it also causes a functional restriction where the child's not able to use their upper lip properly.
Now, they actually say too, medical doctors, that they'll test this by, you told me yesterday, by sticking your tongue out, which is not even a correct test.
That's for the tongue tie. But what's
Okay.
worse for the lip tie is what I actually ran into many times with medical professionals, and they will put that in their medical report, saying that the child will fall on their face and rupture that, and so there's no need for intervention. So they're actually recommending that this child fall and injure themselves, potentially knock their teeth out, just to, you know, release that tie that could be done under a, you know, direct supervision from an oral surgeon in the matter of a few seconds.
Now,
With a laser.
don't get me wrong, because she's the one that's got the important information. But why is it that everything with the medical system has to be painful or toxic? Seriously, guys, all you medical doctors, have you ever thought about the way you speak, the way you work, and what you're doing? Do you ever even look at it, or are you guys just totally brainwashed?
Yeah, so that's unfortunate where, you know, we see that quite a bit where that gets ignored all the time, all the time. And that is like typically the biggest red flag that parents can look out for. However, we also know that 95% of kids that have that upper side where it wraps around and creates that gap in between their teeth, they also have a tongue tie. You just have to know how to look for it. And that's where Dr. Wolf was saying is a lot of medical, uh, doctors.
They don't know what to look for. They're not bad guys. Remember something, everybody. Medical people are not bad people.
They just don't know what to look for. And if you don't know what to look for, you're not going to find it. And the old ways are, how everybody got trained. And this is how I got trained too when I was going to grad school. But I went out and got
Reprogram.
hundreds of continuing education hours to learn what I know. But the old kind of way of testing for tongue tie is to have the child or a person stick their tongue out, and if it's able to, come past their lip, then they don't have a tongue tie, according to kind of the old school ways of diagnosing a tongue tie. But there is also a posterior connective tissue that is limiting the range of motion of the tongue, which prevents the child, the person from elevating that tongue up. And we talked about it yesterday, where in order to swallow correctly, you have to be able to move that tongue up against the roof of the mouth and push it back to push that food or the liquid towards the throat. And it's also important for that tongue to rest on the roof of the mouth. And so if we're not able to do that, or we're constantly feeling pulling underneath because, we have a restriction.
And that's resting. That's resting on the mouth. There are conditions where people have their tongue forced up on the top of the roof of the mouth, and that's called stress. So it's resting there naturally. Like you don't have to think about it. You'll know when you're in harmony when it rests naturally, not when it's pushing. Correct?
Right, exactly. And what another thing is you want to have what we call a freeway space in between your teeth. So your teeth should not be sitting on top of each other. There should be 2 to 3 millimeters apart, and therefore you're not stressing
What do you mean? What?
TMJ.
No. Do you mean the teeth here or the bottom and the top?
So the bottom and the top, they should not be sitting directly on top of each other. There should be 2 to 3 millimeters away, and the tongue should be sitting up against the roof of the mouth. When your tongue is
and it's not the whole tongue, right? It's just the front tip of the tongue, isn't it?
2/3.
That doesn't.
2/3 of your tongue should be
Well,
resting.
I don't have 2/3. What does that mean?
We can take a look.
No.
Not right now. Well, we have to do a proper assessment, Dr. Wolf. But anyways, so 2/3 of your tongue should be resting on the roof of your mouth. And when
Only have that much.
oh, we'll take a look. But anyways,
Does this mean
I don't know. I can't tell
This
you.
means I suck, right?
I have to do it.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So when we have the tongue resting on the roof of the mouth, we are also releasing endorphins. So that is what is regulating your nervous system.
That keeps you out of fight and flight, guys. You gotta understand that. And that's what I was gonna say is that you're always gonna notice that when you're in fight, fright, flight, it's not resting on the top of your mouth. It's pushing tight up against, or it's down. Okay?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And anxiety will create mouth breathing, but we'll get to that. So we're looking at teeth development, and like I said, the important thing is to watch for that gap in between the first 2 upper teeth that are coming in. But then as the child gets more teeth, if their tongue is not resting up against the roof of their mouth, it's not pushing on the roof of the mouth on the bones to which the teeth are attached. So what's going to happen, they can have nice straight teeth, but they're not going to have any gaps. And that's another red flag that we look for, because if there aren't any gaps in between the baby teeth and a toddler, that already tells us that this child is growing a narrow palate. So their jaws are not growing.
What's a palate?
It's the roof of the mouth.
Thank you.
Yes. So the roof of the mouth, the upper jaw, the lower jaw are not developing properly. There is not enough space. Every toddler should have even amount of gaps in between all of their baby teeth. And that is how we know that when the adult teeth are coming in, they're going to have enough room for them to come in. If you have a toddler that has nice straight teeth, but they're right next to each other and there's no space, we already know that's going to be an issue.
Where do braces come in and mouth guards and different things to try to force things around?
Yeah,
Is that correct, or what is that?
I'm going to tell you, if you have then, older child and they have crooked teeth, you know there is a functional problem.
Boom,
There is no one that needs orthodontic work and does not have an oral dysfunction.
boom.
Therefore, all the, or not all, but majority of orthodontists out there, they are after straightening teeth and they will do whatever it takes to just straighten teeth and not look at how the mouth has developed.
So work with the body, don't force the body if possible.
The problem is that we're going to run into issues because if you have too much crowding in your teeth, that is going to cause a problem for those orthodontists because now they don't have room to straighten them, right? And they only care about your smile. So they're going to be pulling your teeth, they're going to be pushing your jaw back to make sure that the top fits the bottom, and they're going to be further compromising the airway. And that is kind of what the whole deal is about. So going kind of back a little bit about, the face development when there's no gaps for the teeth, we already know that the jaws are small. And so what happens is, this is an adult skull, but we want all 32 teeth to be in your mouth, including your wisdom teeth. If you happen to have wisdom teeth being pulled or even your premolars, you already have compromised airway because now this bone and that bone, everything's going to collapse and set back. So,
Okay, wait a minute, wait a minute. Everybody's wisdom teeth are getting pulled, whether there's problems or not, because let me tell you something.
and then,
People are not bad, but they'll always opt to not do their homework or research to make money because we've all been poverty conscious programmed. Now, are you trying to tell me that people don't get rid of their wisdom teeth and they know what they were doing?
right, nope, we should be keeping our teeth. Yep, we are meant to have 32 teeth.
Okay, well, how are you going to do that?
That's
How are you going to
28.
teach? Well, then you
That
need to
is-
teach that.
That is why we need to do the early intervention. That is why we need to get to these kids
Well, what
and
happens, like
babies.
Sage just had his two wisdom teeth up top pulled
I
out,
talked to him about that.
but there was no reaching him. Yeah, but could you have done something for him? He's 25 years old. Could
Yeah.
you have done something?
We could have him being evaluated by an airway-centric orthodontist.
And what would they have done?
They-
Would they have done laser on him too?
No,
No.
what we can do is we can do oral appliances to allow the bone to grow. So the palate, the roof of your mouth is made up of two bones that fuse together. So kind of similar like the skull is
Yeah.
made of
You mean like up here?
yes. So this is made of these palatine processes that come together and fuse in infants, right? And then as the child grows. So what happens is with the oral appliances, we get something on the roof of the mouth, and it's gentle pressure that pulls the two bones apart, and we know that we can grow bone, especially with ionic calcium.
And with ionic calcium therapy, and by creating some stress, not over stress, but just by stressing it. And that's what exercise does to bones. If you exercise, you create a little bit of stress.
Right. So we create the tiny fractures, and then the body creates the bone.
The cell sonic will create tons of fractures. But when you do cell sonic, and you'd have to put water in your mouth, and then you cell sonic, and it creates these micro fractures which release ions from the calcium from the little fractures. And that's how, can I explain something? Is that okay?
Yep.
So when a baby's born, do you know why they grow so fast? Because every millimeter is a fracture and it's happening 24/7. So when that little fracture releases an ion, the ion creates more calcium to fix the crack. We'll call it a crack because that's the easiest way. And that's why they grow so fast. And then guess what happens is as you get older, okay, when you get into bone problems, it's because you're not making enough ions anymore because you're not fracturing, you're fracturing wrong because of osteoporosis, osteopenia, where you should be fracturing. When you do ionic calcium therapy, please go to my website and take a look at my library. It's the only product that actually is a calcium product in the world. It will actually create the ions, and so will a cell sonic because it'll create the small fractures in the bone to reactivate things as if you are young again.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit to the kids. So talking about pulling teeth and not having enough space in the jaw, that is going to cause a restriction in the airway. And I have this guy to show you. So we have the roof of the mouth if the tongue's not resting on the roof of the mouth, when they go to sleep, where's that tongue gonna go? It's gonna fall right into the airway. So what they're gonna do is they're gonna turn around. There's a lot of babies and toddlers that sleep on their stomach with their butt up and their head extended to get that tongue out of the airway so they can stay breathing. But all of that, that tongue position is going to affect how, the face grows and develops. So instead of growing nice in a round shape with the jaws being wide and, protruded forward to allow that tongue to move away from the airway, we're going to be growing this way. We're going to be growing vertically and everything's going to be pulled down. That open mouth posture is going to, pull the jaws down. We're going to have TMJ issues. We're going to have this displacement.
So when the baby goes into survival mode, because that's what it's going to do,
Exactly. Yep.
then it has to restructure the whole face, okay? And understand something, I just want to say this, some people are asking, no, there's no seats left in today's lecture in Bolingbrook. We are sold out, well, it's for free. But tomorrow, we do have space, don't
Yes.
we? So in Bolingbrook, which is just outside of Chicago, at the Bolingbrook Golf Club, we are doing a lecture tomorrow, what time?
6 to 9.
6 to 9. So there is space for that one. And the next question is, yes, somebody's asking if they can get training. Well, guess what? We have, what's coming out is, we have Braveheart Nation. We've been working on this for a long time. We put a lot of money into this, almost $250,000. And it's called Braveheart Nation. It will be out. And when it comes out, Margaret's going to have a weekly show. And so if anybody wants to right now, we're going to be doing a show tomorrow. Is this okay with you?
Yep.
Can you, anybody who has questions, if you text me at 469-861-8884 on WhatsApp or just straight through because it's a US number. I'll collect your questions before we come on tomorrow around lunch, right?
Yep.
And what we're going to do is we'll answer all your questions. It may not be right at lunch, it'll be a little bit, but send me your questions and we'll do that, okay? All right, and if you want to come to the lecture tomorrow, what's the number?
You can text me at 773-322-3988 and I'll send you the registration link.
Or you can text my phone number, which I just gave you, and I'll let you get back to it.
Okay. So anyways, so we're talking about breathing and when we have the mouth open, obviously we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing as far as breathing, which is nasal breathing. We are not meant to be mouth breathers. God created us to have, a way out if the nose is congested so that we can continue to breathe, but it's not to be a full time. So I usually joke with my kids, with my patients when we're starting to work on is, how often should you breathe through your mouth? And the answer is as often as should you be eating through your nose, which is.
And the only time that you're going to breathe through your mouth is when you're filled with boogers. Okay, so you're filled with boogers because you have an inflammatory diet, an inflammatory mind, which causes you to actually become inflamed, and then your body makes mucus to try to protect the lining throughout your whole body, and also to get rid of the infection that you created on an emotional and physical level with what we would call normal thinking and a normal diet, which is abnormal.
Right, and I see that all the time, and the truth is that this is the principle of if you don't use it, you lose it. So basically, if you're not nasal breather, your body's going to lose that ability to feel comfortable breathing.
Snooze and then snore.
Yeah, and your body, when you're mouth breathing, you're going to be constantly in that anxiety mode because you're releasing too much carbon dioxide. Your body's not getting the oxygen that it needs. Carbon dioxide is actually the gas that carries the oxygen molecule into your body, into your blood. So if you're breathing too much through your mouth and releasing too much carbon dioxide, even though you feel like you're getting more air, the oxygen is not being released into your bloodstream. So
and then it in itself becomes a toxin.
Exactly.
Go figure, isn't that crazy?
Yep.
And remember that when you actually breathe through your nose, it causes a swirling action into your blood, into your brain, into your cells, And that swirling action causes structured oxygen, which is the same thing that we talked about when we talked about structured water.
Yep, yep.
No
So,
surface tension.
so that is that, and so that is why a lot of these children, have problems then sleeping because they're fighting to breathe all night long. And at night we don't really have control over the way we're breathing because everything is, you know, the brain is running us. So we're pretty much unconscious and we're relying on muscle memory. So whatever we're doing during the day, we're going to be doing at night, but the brain is going to be redirecting our body to be able to continue to breathe. So we can have ethnic event, we can have, events where the child, stops breathing. We can have snoring. Snoring is never, ever, ever normal. Does not matter how tired your child is. Does not matter that they didn't sleep well the night before. It
But
does,
this goes for adults too, everyone.
yes,
It's just that today we're talking about young children.
exactly. But snoring is never normal. So that is another huge red flag if you have a child that snores even once a week. There is an airway obstruction and they're fighting to stay alive, to be able to breathe while they're sleeping. So now if their brain is focused on keeping them alive by breathing, what's happening with all the processes that should be taking place?
Remember that when you sleep, that is the most restorative time for the healing. So you're not going to heal. What, try to picture this. Anybody with a chronic illness that they believe they have an autoimmune life-threatening disease never rests. And if you don't rest, you don't heal. And that's it. So if the body will actually go into fight or flight without someone thinking. So the baby doesn't go, oh, I'm in trouble. The body says, I'm in trouble.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then in children in particular, why is sleep important? Because all the learning is happening in sleep. So we don't learn during the day. We observe the information, and then we're supposed to put all that
Process.
in the long-term memory during sleep. So,
Can I explain this?
yeah,
So what happens is when you eat, okay, you're not getting your food into your cells right away. So you'll eat and the eating period is up until no later than 8 o'clock at night. It shouldn't be anyways. And then what happens is after you've taken in all of that food, then the body starts to process it and get it ready for delivery into your cells when you're sleeping. And it does the same thing with information. And if you are in a situation like Margaret just said, then you are not going to establish long-term memory for important information. And then you're going to be upset with your child that they're stupid, they're lazy. And when we're done calling everybody names, let's just calm down and learn something. Children are not bad. Adults have bad beliefs.
and
Okay.
and we don't know how to help them because
And we're not bad either. We just have been programmed to terrorize ourselves and our children. Okay.
so the sleep is not there. So therefore, the child can be moody the next day. They have tantrums. They don't want to eat. They're tired. They're sleepy.
But they don't want to eat because they don't have the energy to eat. And if you did feed them, the food would rot anyways.
Right, and they crave sugar, and so that's kind of how it is. And once they get these kids to school, now they're having trouble attending. They have trouble focusing. They have trouble listening, and then they get labeled, behavioral kids, learning disability. ADHD. There's a study out there that
There's no
proves,
ADHD.
yes,
There's no ADD. There's no depression. All of this stuff is made up. You ever notice something? First, we'll get a new symptom, and then we'll wait for a breakthrough from the medical system, and then we'll create a drug that we can't even name, and it's made out of petroleum.
but the study I want to mention is that they studied the kids that have the diagnosis of ADHD. 90% of these kids have sleep issues,
Disorders.
and that's not being addressed. They're just put on adrenal, not what's the drug called? Okay, it's slipping my. But anyway, so they're being put on drugs, Ritalin. They're putting
The
on,
Ritalin.
yes. So they're being put on drugs so that they can at least sit in a seat at school because they're
gonna do well on Ritalin, so understand, all it is let's, let's calm this terrorist down so he doesn't disturb everybody else.
Exactly.
So adults, wake the heck up.
Yep, and typically the school system that directs it because it's, disrupting the class, the teachers gotta deal with it, and so they're really forcing the parents and putting them against the wall, saying either your child's gonna be on medication or they're not gonna be allowed to come to school.
And then, if it continues, then guess what? You'll get assessed, and then your child will be
In a
known as
special
a
education.
handicapped
Yep.
child that has a chemical or hormonal problem that can't be fixed.
Yep. And then all these kids are, then put in special education programs or they're being pulled out. They have an IEP, so they're labeled. They, get special treatment at school. And that's how you kind of groom these kids to be behavioral kids and be, you want to call them troublemakers, whatever, because
They're not troublemakers.
no, but that's how they are being raised and they're being told all the time that there's something wrong with them.
Listen, I'll tell you something. I stood in the hall with my nose to the wall so often, I don't even want to talk about it. Okay? Yeah,
Yeah, but that's kind of what I see. These kids that have so-called learning disabilities, or they have speech or language delays. They have trouble reading.
They have trouble calming down and just focusing properly.
Mhm.
Okay? Hey, you're daydreaming. No, I'm not.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly. And so that's how they may go through school being labeled as whatever label that they want to give them, and then these kids are. I can't tell you guys how many of my patients are on medication. It's just crazy stuff, and and on top of like the foods that they're eating, their diets. That's another that's another conversation.
Well, we'll get into that later, but this is why it's gonna be really important that you come on and start watching Margaret's show when we bring out our Touch app, okay? It's gonna go all over the world. This is free, everybody. This is free information. We're gonna have, what I believe to be the top, people in health around the world on our platform, and it's a private platform. It's like Facebook, but it cannot be government regulated, okay? All right.
Yeah. And so, these kids are having trouble sleeping, then they have trouble eating, then they have trouble with speech, with language, with learning, and then, they struggle. They struggle throughout their whole life. And then we can talk about, the teenagers and the adults tomorrow, and I, tell you what things to look out for and stuff like that. But going back to early intervention, when you see the red flags, like I said, no gaps in between the teeth, or the big gap in between the upper central incisors. If you see that your child's mouth breathing, if you see that your child's snoring, if
Most people don't know what that means though, big gap. They don't even know what incisors mean. Can you please do
the
that?
first two top teeth.
I know, but
So your first two middle
you see
teeth.
what happens? These specialists, they want to talk down to us and make us feel stupid.
I don't know how else easier
Well,
to
these
explain.
two front teeth.
Upper front teeth.
I know, but we gotta bring it all down.
Yes. So if there's a big gap in between your upper front teeth, it's
I understand now.
okay. If your child is mouth breathing, if your child is constantly tired, if they're wetting the bed, that's another red flag. And they're 4, 5, 6 year old, and then they still have issues. If they wake up in the middle of the night, if they have night terrors, all of those things are airway related. If they're grinding their teeth, if you see that their baby teeth are grinded down, if they have already a malocclusion where the teeth either are the bottom ones are pushed back, or the top or the bottom is pushed out, those are all things that are already red flags for how the face is supposed to be growing in developing.
And the stress on the TMJ.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then guess what? The vagus nerve comes
Uh-huh.
down through there. So it's locked. So they can't even rest. They can't even rest when they're sleeping. Because if that vagus nerve, okay, is not in a parasympathetic relaxed state, there is no dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins being delivered.
Yeah, and you have no
And when we do non-surgical, using our elbow, we put your neck across our knee, so it opens right up, and then we go in between each vertebrae, and we can get rid of that scar tissue that's been built up for 20, 30 years. But the reality is I think if we were really a health conscious society, we would be sending everyone to somebody like Margaret. And that's the truth.
Yep. And so, when you have a child that has all these red flags, as you like to call them, we really have to do early intervention. And there's a lot you could still do in a child that's, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And the intervention is a lot quicker. Like I said, I work.
Because it's not cemented.
Yeah,
Okay?
and the child is still in a phase of growth. So what we do is I work with airway-centric orthodontists who, straight teeth is the last thing that they care about, is the airway size that they care about, is the tongue space they care about. Make sure that the tongue has a place to go, to rest in the roof of the mouth. Make sure that the airway is adequate size, so there's no blockages, that they're able to breathe through their nose freely. And so those are the orthodontists that you want to go to. And then you work with somebody like myself, a myofunctional therapist, a feeding specialist, to work on the muscle function of the face. And then we, put it all together. If there is a tongue tie, we address that as well with, an oral surgeon who specializes in releasing ties. You don't want to go to somebody just because they have a laser. You want to make sure that they have a team approach, working with a myofunctional therapist, working with an airway-centric orthodontist, and he has a team come up with a plan of when this child needs, an orthodontic treatment, when this child needs to start therapy, when this child needs to, get a release done for any oral ties, and we decide that as a team. If you go to somebody and then just say, oh, we can do extenders, no big deal, that's not probably a person that you want to go to, because we're not caring too much about expanding the roof of the mouth this way.
You never got to the source of the problem. You
Yeah.
never got to the source of the problem. It's the same thing, everyone. Understand, there are only symptoms of the body saying you're out of alignment, you're out of harmony. There are no diseases. A disease is when the symptom is not even being recognized as body talk. And if you don't understand body talk, right, it's a language which hardly anybody does, so it's not your fault.
Yep, and like I said yesterday, on the video that we did, I like to call myself the party planner, because I typically get the child coming into me because they have a symptom, whether it's a speech problem, they have.
Catch it before they call it a disease, because once
Yeah.
they do, then they want a drug.
Yes, so whether it's, a speech impairment, they have trouble making the R's, or they have a lisp where the tongue comes forward for the S or the SH or whatnot, and then maybe they have trouble making sentences. They have a language delay. They're 2, 3 years old, and they, don't use a lot of language. And so those are the kids I typically get, or kids that are 2, 3, 4-year-olds, and they are very, what the society likes to call them picky eaters, but they're not picky. They just go for the foods that they feel safe with, because there is an oral dysfunction, and they don't feel safe with chewing and swallowing other types of foods. So that's another, symptom of the children that come to see me with issues, and they.
Survival mode.
Right, and then typically I'm the party planner, because I have to lay out the whole program or the whole plan to the parents and say it's not just about the speech, or it's not just about the feeding. This is just the very kind of, most prominent symptom that is coming to the surface, but there's so much more underneath there that you have to address. If we just go after speech, for example, and I, work with this child and continue to drill their R's, it's never going to work, because their tongue is not functioning how it's supposed to function. All I can teach them is to compensate.
And how do you like this? Your child is on the spectrum. Your child is autistic, or your child is mentally challenged or compromised.
And we have many kids that have gone through their kind of childhood, and nobody paid attention to their tongue, and it's very very disturbing when I get a 12, 13, 14-year-old and they have a tongue tie that's to the tip. That's not even something that you need to be looking for. They're tied to the tip. But this child was so bright that they figured out how to compensate to the point where the doctor said he's fine or she's fine, and we didn't come up against issues until this child had need for orthodontics. And thank God they went into an office that had some idea about tongue function and said, hey, you really need to look at that thing, and get that assessed and get that released. But it's not all the time. It's not all the time. I've had kids who had, they're now 15, 16, 17, 20, and they had multiple sets of braces. I have adults, and we're talking about it tomorrow, but I have adults that have gone through, 6 to 8 years of braces, and nobody's looking at their tongue function.
And tomorrow we won't have to cut it shorter, but the reality is that, guess what? We have over 100 people coming in about 55 minutes, and we've got to get there.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to say to them?
No, send me your questions. We'll be on tomorrow. And
You can send them to Margaret or myself. We'll collect them, right?
Yep, and then we can answer them tomorrow. But yeah, look up my website.
Let's give them our phone numbers again.
Sure. My phone number is 773-322-3988. My clinic is Advanced Therapy and Wellness Center in Plainfield, Illinois. And my website is mytherapywellness.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Beautiful. And if you want to call me at 469-861-8884, you can put your questions there. Or if you have a health question, feel free to call me because we're just kicking off the World Tour. And I'm going to be traveling for the next 8 months. And just so you know, we have a lecture today. We have space tomorrow at Bolingbroke Golf Club. And we start at 6 o'clock, so if you want to come, you want to be there by about 5:45. And we have room for about, I think, 30 or 40 more, right? It's a big room.
Maybe like 20.
Oh, 20 more, that's it. But it's a huge room and it's almost full. So there you go. And the other thing I want to say is that if you're somebody that has something that's really going to help humankind, if you are somebody that really are coming from your heart and there's something special that you really feel that you can gift the world with, in a few weeks when we come out with our new app, we will have our own Facebook platform, okay? And you can come on and do a show like Margaret. This is why I built this. There's no charge. We're not charging for this. If you've got something that you think that you can help the world with and bring us all together as a family, I want you to know that that's what this platform's for. Now, I'm going to be doing that lecture tomorrow night, and then I'm flying out the next morning. I'm lecturing in Stuart, Florida, and I don't know her number off by heart, but I'll be lecturing in Stuart, Florida on Wednesday night, okay? So if you would like to come to the lecture on Wednesday night, it's at the Flagler in Stuart, and all you can do is you just call my number, and if you want to get a seat, that's free as well. And then I'm on Saturday, I'm going to be with Jim Gale, and he is Land of Plenty. He's turning gardens in all over the world, and he's making these like affiliates all in different countries where we're turning lawns into gardens. And I'm going to be with him doing a few shows, and then from there I'll be going to Canada, where I'm going to be doing some specialized trainings for people. And then I'm coming back to Stuart, Florida in let me see here, April, early April. So go to newworldpractitioner.com if you'd like to come to our free lectures, or if you'd like to come and become a health practitioner the way we've been talking about, because that's when we're going to be doing our certification trainings for Wolf Don Surgical Whole Life Coach. Also, we're going to be doing a Braveheart Circle for the general public if you'd like to come and unleash your authentic self and stand in your inner power. Okay, and that's a 7-day course. And then we're also doing a 3-day course for women. How would you like to rock that pelvis? Okay, just like Elvis. Okay, all right, well, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back here tomorrow. And 3, 2, 1, you got this, Braveheart.